What's the common thing between Tesla, Einstein, Faraday, and Boltzmann? Despite contributing so much to the world like AC, induction motor, wireless communication, relativity, photoelectric effect, electromagnetism, entropy, and thermodynamics, which often form the backbone of today's society and have created enormous wealth for thousands of companies within last 2 centuries. None of them got richer. In 1927, where the brightest minds in the world came to Fifth Solvay Conference to debate the true nature of reality, this image particularly stood out in the highlight of modern history. 17 people in it went on to become a Nobel Prize winner. Fast forward to today, when our world has progressed so much, why there isn't a similar image that analogous to it? Why is that even after 200 years of modern science, people in academia still struggle to get grants and funding?
The money that gets injected into their research is kind of the breath that keeps them going. It's the fuel that allows them to work so many more years on their research.
It was also a rather rude awakening. It made me realize that this institute wasn't about knowledge discovery, it was about money making. And the more I saw of academia, the more I realized it wasn't just this particular institute and this particular professor. It was generally the case.
I've seen quite a lot of times if a supervisor doesn't get funding, they panic and they take on projects they shouldn't take on. And quite often the stress is passed down to their postdocs and their PhD students because they've taken on this project for money. They need to get fast results. Maybe it's an industry partnership.
Why does it seem like the pace of innovation in physics is at its lowest today, and people are questioning whether the science is in crisis? Since childhood, I have been deeply enamored by shows like Cosmos and Curiosity. However, as I started to learn more about the research community across the globe, I realized there's a darker truth that no one is talking about. Why are billions of dollars of taxpayers' money splurged on the things that has no use case or impact in the real world? Why are so many people quitting academia out of nowhere? We all know how screwed up our education system is. But what I'm about to tell you might as well completely shock you and blow your mind. So stay with me till the end and I'll unfold the things that they don't want regular citizens to know about. To really begin with, all you need to ask is why universities? Why do we need them? By nature, we all are born curious and it's in our DNA to learn about surrounding that we live in. Curiosity is what have kept our species alive for so long. As cavemen, we shared our experiences with the tribe to maximize our chances of survival. Sometimes we even recorded our experiences in form of cave painting. As time passed and the human population grew, society became more complex, creating a need for capable people well versed in politics, economics, administration, farming, philosophy, and more. Since religion played an important role in all parts of the world, access to education was linked to the relationship between a guru and a disciple. Fast forward to 17th century, when scientific ideologies slowly began to replace the religious institute, the roots of modern universities as we know them today were established. Coincidentally, with the advent of industrial age, colleges and universities began to serve a critical role providing skilled engineers and workers to meet its need. For a long time, fundamental sciences and engineering were intertwined and prospered equally. Sometimes industries themselves funded colleges in Europe. Enamored by the scientific progress of that time, Werner von Siemens, the founder of Siemens, funded PTR in Germany, where Max Planck worked and discovered quantum physics. I made a video about it, so do check it out after this. Coming back to the point, the 19th and the 20th century were a golden period for all the subjects we studied in our high school textbooks. World War further accelerated the technological innovation and engineering as a field became even more refined. At this point, engineering progress began to be driven by private entities and became decoupled from fundamental sciences, which were often funded by the governments in both Europe and the US. As for private entities, since they were designing solutions that directly affected people's lives and generated revenue, they had an incentive to spend more money on engineering R&D. This holds true today for companies like Apple, Google, and Broadcom, which invest billions of dollars. Keep this thing in mind as it will really help us to understand the underlying problem. From 1900 to late 80s, we saw the boom in quantum physics, cosmology, particle physics, and more. Government funding agencies often increase their spending year after year, creating a network of established research institutes. Additionally, figures like Einstein, Feynman, and Hubble created much needed excitement for upcoming generations, convincing them to pursue career in academic research in hopes that they might as well become like the idols we studied in our textbooks. What the regular audience outside of academia think about the researcher is that essentially they are the people who spend years trying to earn a PhD to invent something that is beneficial for society, right? But that's not the case majority of the time. Imagine for a moment you purchase a lottery ticket and luckily won a $10 million. What would you do with that money? Would you even have a motivation to get out of the bed and go to work since you no longer have to work for money? Now, some of you might say that, yes, I really love my job, and to that I'll say, well, good for you. But in this entire planet, most of the people do not find their work fully satisfying. And when universities are state sponsored with the hope that researchers will have the freedom to do their best, it still doesn't lead to a better outcome. Since many academic folks have never spent a day of their life trying to step outside of the academic bubble to see the real problem people face every day, whatever paper they have published will be essentially useless. By useless, I mean in practical sense. Can I use your paper to solve a particular problem in society and make money from it? This doesn't only apply to the field close to engineering or applied sciences, but also to philosophy, cosmology, and others. Remember, there's a reason why Interstellar made more than $700 million. Some might argue that science should be done for the sake of science, but people forget that universities run on taxpayers' money. Would you ever want to invest in mutual fund that has a negative return? No, right? Then why this is acceptable in academia where research often doesn't help industries or society to create a net positive ROI? This problem doesn't exist in private companies as they must be in tune with the market forces. Otherwise, they'll go bankrupt. You don't have to be a mystic yogi or Einstein to be creative and invent new and useful things. There are countless problems out there waiting to be solved. Listen to what Leslie Lamport has to say about this.
As I progressed in my career, I came to appreciate the idea of working in industry. That's where most of the interesting problems that I found came from. From engineers having a problem to solve. It reminds me actually of something that Auguste Renoir once said. Someone asked him why he painted outside rather than in his studio. And what he said is, if I were painting in the studio and I wanted to paint a leaf, I would be able to think of only a half dozen or so different kinds of leaves that I could paint. But when I was painting outdoors, there were just these millions of different kinds of leaves that were there that I could paint from. I found my research the same way, that if I sat down, and just, contemplated my navel and think about problems, there was this small number of problems that I could think of. But there were just scads of them sitting out in industry waiting to be solved.
One of my personal experiences with academia was last year at a 5-day quantum physics conference. On the last day, there was a poster session where a PhD student was giving a talk on neuromorphic computing, claiming that Moore's law is dead, which isn't the case. As a software developer, I noticed during her presentation that she didn't even knew the basics of programming, such as the difference between Python and C++, the difference between CPU, ASICs, and FPGA, or why Apple moved from Intel to ARM chips. So I asked her several questions, and every time I received a blank stare. Here she was in the last year of her PhD, knowing nothing about software engineering and never have written a single piece of software, claiming that neuromorphic computing was the future was quite laughable and also a little depressing, as she has invested so much effort into her work, being oblivious that it's not how industry works. Even in cosmology, if you know the physics of particles in galaxy, you need simulations to test your hypothesis. The problem is that researchers aren't computer scientists who know how to write optimized code to solve their problems efficiently. The library that they use are very old, written in Fortran. It's 2024 and we talk about Rust and memory safe languages, yet we are still using legacy code. Most importantly, the documentation for many of this repository is horrible. Who writes the documentation in PDF? Look at the documentation from Next.js. Everything is neatly organized and searchable. This is crucial for helping people quickly getting on board. But the problem doesn't stop there. Many scientific packages used by physicists are made for CPU, not GPUs. This means what would have taken few hours or days can take weeks or months. If you wonder why scientific process takes so long, this is one of the many reasons. Most importantly, universities don't hire good engineers for this purpose, unlike private companies. Since academia doesn't involve implementing practical solutions, all it does is create an army of intellectuals who are incentivized to perform mental gymnasium for living by publishing paper. Lots of them. Writing paper is a gateway to climbing the academic ladder and ensuring they get published in so-called reputable journal like Nature. By reputable, I mean the journal who exploit researchers by charging anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000 for single PDF and then doing marketing on their behalf.
Hey, Christopher. Yeah, boss, what's up? What do you think about making some of our articles open access? That's a good idea. Make the articles free to the public so that anybody can appreciate the latest scientific advancements. I like it. Of course, the author would have to pay some kind of publishing fee. Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. What, like a couple $100? Yeah, I was thinking maybe $11,000. What? Yeah, $11,000, and we put your article on our website for anybody to read. Why so much? Oh, you know, all the costs. What costs? Reviewing the article? Yeah, we don't pay reviewers. We guilt them into it because it's good for science. Okay, what about formatting? Your 12-year-old niece does that for us. Well, we gotta publish it. That costs money. It's a PDF on a website. Kaylee does it in like 2 seconds. Kaylee? Your niece. Oh, yeah. Besides, who's gonna be able to afford this? Oh, people will pay. Why? Because they have to. What do you mean? Researchers have to publish in order to keep their jobs or get promoted, and we're one of the most prestigious journals around. People will pay. So it's extortion. Here at Nature, we're doing crime. Oh, Christopher, don't be so dramatic. So let me get this straight. You want to charge researchers $11,000 to publish an open access article, thereby ensuring that only researchers with the most money get to publish an article, which defeats the purpose of having open access articles in the first place. Yeah, that's right. And this is guaranteed to be profitable because researchers' livelihoods are dependent on a predatory system that values publishing in high-impact journals. Hey, you got it. This, of course, is insane. It's academics, baby.
If you want to increase your salary and secure more grants, all that matters is how many papers you have written, where they are published, how many times it has been cited by others. This creates a scenario where regardless of your report has new credible findings or not, you can tweak the data a little bit here and there, apply some statistics and get your paper published. The publishing model of this journal is deeply flawed, relying on the biases of editor rather than letting people like you and me decide ourselves democratically. We have social media where cats videos are distributed algorithmically, so why can't be same done for research papers? Despite having rigorous checks, Nature continues to retract article every once in a while. Since funding is limited, researchers have to compete and you never feel quite secure. Also, the politics in academia is rather unusual. We all know how corporate politics looks and how many TV shows has been made about it. Academic politics is really subtle and sort of runs in the shadow. The limited funding and the grants are the main reason why there's always a silent battle amongst researchers. It's like a stock market trading. If you lose the money, someone else is going to win it. The need for prestige and inflating one's own ego is also the big issue in academia. Sometimes we might wonder why these people don't come down to our level to explain physics and provide case studies so that we can understand general relativity, quantum physics at the same level that they do. Sometimes it's one of the ways to make them feel superior or above average. This isn't something many professors themselves aren't aware of. Many of them I have personally interacted with have acknowledged off the record that yes, there are many issues, but they just cannot do everything. Many of them balance the responsibility of teaching, researching, writing papers, and managing their personal life. This is a classic problem of how to design a culture within an organization. The problem is, the culture can only flow from leadership top down, not vice versa. Often, the deans and the director don't have any incentive to bring change. Take for example science communication. Many universities claim to have a department dedicated to it. But from my personal experience, I can comfortably say that it's below standard. It's often meant towards the school-going children to engage them in some fun science activity as a way to gain a PR. But for engineer like me who really want to know and understand things in deep, it's as useless as one can imagine. Communicating science is about sharing the excitement of what humans are capable of and teaching how to think. I remember attending the seminar at IISER Pune and other places where they discussed the complexity of building telescope and the need for terabits of bandwidth. But none of these fascinating details get written in paper. The focus is always on very specific narrow detail, which is fine, but I think research papers should also include how the paper was written amongst many authors who contributed what and wrote which section of the paper. Most importantly, what were the conversations they had prior to writing the paper. These aspects are even more important than actual research paper itself, as they can serve as a case study for the audience on how people work in academia. This approach promotes a truly open culture similar to free and open source software, where you can go to GitHub, see the conversations in pull requests and Q&A, and understand how the current software are being improved further. This could be also applicable to all research groups. If academia continues to be in its own world and fails to communicate properly with broader audience, it won't generate necessary traction for universities to be taken seriously. People are already questioning the effectiveness of colleges and whether dropping out might be a better option. In any democracy, people play a crucial role in making policies. In India, for example, even politicians in ministerial positions are often uneducated. Take for example, a union minister couldn't even write Save Girl Child correctly in Hindi. Whether we like it or not, these are the people who decide how much funding is allocated to IITs, IIMs or IISER. If academia doesn't communicate effectively, how will it convince funding agencies to allocate more money? This situation creates a perfect recipe for artificially creating scarcity. Most importantly is the student who take the brunt of system's inefficiency. Earlier, I used to think people who do PhDs and postdocs are really dedicated, patient, and committed towards science, right? But when I saw the reality for myself, I realized how ignorant I have been. For engineers, there are thousands of companies where they can find employment. But that's not the case for academia. We have seen that academia has little relation to the real world and how scarce the environment is. People who choose a career in academia often have no choice but to stay in academia. Even for assistant professor role, the competition is tremendous. In top institute, you have to wait until your 30s to even begin as an assistant professor. It takes the same amount of time as a medical student to become a top tier surgeon, and we all know how much money a surgeon can earn. These aren't challenging problems, like I said, you need to focus on the fundamentals. Academia itself constitutes multi-billion-dollar economy. We at Experientia are very well aware of this problem, and I am ready to bet my career on it. I have already laid out the details in this blog, so do read it. The crux is that we want to grow this channel, increase our reach, distribution, and systematically solve this issue one by one. Thankfully, being a software engineer and seeing how the tech world really works, my belief is that if we got everything correct, we could create enormous impact that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. Again, I highly encourage you to read this blog that will give you a good enough understanding about what Experientia is all about. With that said, I thank you for watching this video. If you have questions, comments or queries, please let us know in the comment box below and we'll be happy to get back to you. Till then, stay connected, Stay subscribed, and I'll see you next time.